My name is Dan Gullickson, and I'm the council president here at Holy Trinity for the 2013 year.
Pastor Eric Thompson started my call in October of 2012, so I've been here a little over a year. The senior pastor, although I'm the only pastor, so.
My name is George Wynn. I have lived in New Prague for 47 years, and I've been a member of this church for 47 years.
All right, my name is Don Foltz, and married to my wife Eunice, and we have 3 children. Prior to coming to New Prague in 1970, we had been in Ivanhoe, Arco, Minnesota, and started out ministry in Mankato. So we came here to New Prague, Holy Trinity, and spent 10 years of those ministry years here at New Prague.
When he came to town here, our church was 120 people on the north side of town. You had to look for it to find it. St. Wenceslas had 1,400 families. So we learned what a minority person is. And as the time went by, that little church with 120 members, we had a little addition for Sunday school and meetings and such. And then we started growing, and then one day we had to build this church.
I first became a member here at Holy Trinity back in 1998. And when our family came in through the doors there, we noticed the beautiful stained glass windows. And it wasn't until 2004 when I was working on a building project here at church, when I was sitting with Daryl Bauer, he was one of our members at the time, and he commented, he said, you know, Dan, in the sanctuary, there's a biblical message there in the stained glass windows. And I really hadn't seen that before until he mentioned that to me. And as I looked at that, I thought, wow, there's probably a lot of other people here that come through our doors not realizing that there is a biblical message in those stained glass windows. And then as I researched it a little bit further, I found out more in terms of the effort that this community put forth back 35 plus years ago to make that happen. And I really think it's a nice asset in our church here and in our community. And I think it's something that needs to be communicated to others so that they have a better understanding of what the significance of those stained glass windows are when they come through our doors.
I was a member of the original building committee of this building, and the windows basically give us the triune God. Jesus, God the Father, and God the Holy Spirit. And they're depicted in an abstract rendering of God and how He surrounds us in our life.
So my understanding about the windows is that there's actually a sermon somewhere that tells about the windows, which as a pastor I was most interested in, because then one Sunday when I'm gone, they can always just do that and kind of fill in the space. I don't know much about the process other than what I've been told, which is that they slowly but surely paid for the windows and put them in. They did a lot of fundraising when they were first putting the church up, and a lot of that fundraising was directed toward putting the windows into place.
We did the groundbreaking. This was a cornfield, and we had about 5 acres. And we came out on a Sunday, I think, in the afternoon after we had been worshiping at the elementary school, which we had been for a couple of years. And we had that groundbreaking. And then we started to see the building go up piece by piece. But it was very interesting to watch this structure go up because of the way it is constructed, 6 sides, and the roof, and then, that upper part. And then to finally see the final product.
When we built this church, budget was really tight. At that time, if you remember back in the late or early 80s, interest rates were 14 to 21%. And so we thought we had a real hotshot deal of getting a loan for like 14%. And that was way beyond us. So finally, one of the banks in town loaned the money to us for about 7%, and I'll be forever indebted to that bank president. He wasn't a member of our church, but he said, you need a church, and we're going to back it, so we did. So with our real tight budget, we had that strip of windows up above. Just had plain glass in them. And we had to do parking lot. We had to do a lot of different things. So as we went along, someone came with the idea, maybe we should start on the windows. So then a plan was drawn up, found out the cost, and then we started raising funds.
Individuals contributed to that, the purchasing of the stained glass panes that are there. But there was also an antique show that we had here at Holy Trinity, and that was an opportunity for people to work shoulder to shoulder, next to one another, to raise funds for the church, and some of those proceeds went to help pay for the stained glass windows as well.
The windows were brought to us by Byron, and I don't remember his last name, the architect who designed, he knew the connection. He was based out of Rochester, the architect was, and he said, I have this artist in Winona who does stained glass, and he said, I think you should look at it. It's a different type of stained glass. When we built Holy Trinity, it wasn't your, quote, traditional Lutheran church. It was more of the members were non-Lutheran than really were members, because at that time, New Prague was a very Catholic community. And if you weren't Catholic, and if you weren't a fundamentalist Baptist, there were no other churches to go to in this town. So the Methodists, the Presbyterians, everybody else were members of Holy Trinity. And that played into part of the construction of the building, that it wasn't designed as a traditional Lutheran church. It was designed more of a contemporary. And with that came the light. As Byron said, the lighting needs to be part of that too.
So the windows were all paid for or donated by 17 families. And it was, each panel was so much. The windows actually ended up costing us about $12,000. And if you take the money times, that would be about 62 grand today. So that was a big hunk of money. At that time, that was probably 3 cars or 2 cars, so do it today. So we started and got those, because every Sunday, and certain times of the year, the sun would come through and hit the pastor right in the eyes, through that slot there. So we started filling them, and within 2 years, we had them all done.
Moving into that new building with those clear story windows all the way around, and I think maybe at that first Sunday we were there were the windows in the back, but nothing on the sides or out in front. And started the service, I can't remember at that point, it was about 9 o'clock probably, and things were fine. But then after about 10-15 minutes, the sun got up to a point where it was coming right through those windows, and I couldn't see anything of anybody sitting out there. So that was when we decided that we're going to have to make a quicker move on getting the rest of those up there. And I think it happened a little more quickly than we had planned on.
Now, that's accomplishment at that time to do that. Here we built a new church. We didn't have much money. We didn't have a lot of members. And we did it, and it was just an accomplishment. So everybody felt good about it. And they looked nice. And the nice thing is the company that designed them made it such that they designed the whole thing, and they made them all, which would never happen today. And then they said, as you pay for a panel, which was the eight sections, they would put them in that way. And so just a hair over 2 years we had them in. So.
My name is Bill Reinertz. Reinertz Stained Glass Studios is a company, incorporated. My father, William Sr., started Reinertz in 1950. And in 1970, when I graduated from college, I applied for a couple jobs and was unsuccessful. And so I thought, well, I'll work for my dad for a while, and he encouraged me to work here. And so what I thought was going to be 1 year, possibly 2, turned into, I'm going on my 42nd year now. Larry Conway, Universal Studios, Joe Conway was my father's age, and that's Larry's father. They started about 1950, both of them, And of the several competitors that we have, they were friendly competitors. We went to the same grade school, went to the same church. Both were Catholic families. We had 10 kids, I think they had 8. And so I knew several of the family members, including Larry. Larry was probably 10 years older than me. Larry ended up getting Parkinson's disease I think he was about 50. And he continued to run his father's business after that for probably another 20 years. And I got a call from his brother Mike, who's another friend of mine that does Michael's Lighting in Winona. And he said, Bill, Larry's having trouble with his business, could you help him out? And so went over and talked with Larry, and he was just having trouble with his help handling it, handling the help and handling the production and those sorts of things and the selling. So I said, well, why don't you just merge with me, and I'll buy your materials or his scaffolding, those sorts of things, and we'll just bring you into here and put you in an office, and you can do your universal selling from here, and I'll do mine, and we'll work together. So that worked out pretty good for 2 or 3 years. And it was quite enjoyable comparing notes, because we've both been in the business so long together, and only 2 people that have done it know the things that happen and the little stories. So we actually had a pretty good time for 2.5, 3 years. And at that point, Larry's health failed, and he went to a rest home, and he has since passed away. But we still do. You know, we get callbacks for universal work, and we still do a few projects every year of theirs. And again, they were a friendly competitor, they were a quality competitor, so we got along very well, and it was a nice fit for us. Richard Kammerer was very well connected in the Lutheran Church, and he taught art, he taught liturgical art, and he actually was a very good salesperson for Larry, because he initiated several projects. One of the ones we did was a Lutheran hospital. Was it Lutheran Hospital in Forest Lake, right south of Chicago? And Richard designed the windows, and it was a walkway of 8 stories. So we put windows, not in every single, there were like 8 huge lights that composed this kind of tunnel that went through every floor, but it continued all the way up. So we did a design that went up through the hospital, and very spectacular at night from the outside when it would be lit. So we did some other work for him in Madison, Wisconsin. Did a very big project, finished up a huge project that Larry had initiated in Minot, North Dakota. And since then, Richard, again, all of the good people in this business, the old artists, are getting up there in years. And so they have health issues, and Richard has become less productive. He's more stays to home now, and is not out teaching and that sort of thing. So, but Richard was a good artist, and had a great reputation, especially with the Lutheran Church.
My name is Carl Iverson. I'm the Special Projects Manager here at Reinhardt Stained Glass Studios. Most of our sales are done through direct marketing, and we'll hear from a church that's interested in some windows. They'll tell us what size they are, and we try to get some idea. Basically, our windows are broken into a couple areas. One is if there's going to be a figure in there, that's kind of the higher price ones. The next thing is there going to be some kind of symbol design? And then the lower level, price-wise, is just the plain stained glass windows, which is based on colors. At any rate, so when the church gives us a call, we try to find out the size of the windows, the number of windows, and from that we can give them a pretty good estimate of how much it will cost to make and install the windows. Once we get an agreement on that, the next process then is to try and make a sketch, colored sketch representative to scale of the windows. And once we do that, we're able to start making the windows themselves. So what I'd like to do is give you an idea of a conventional stained glass window, which is, this is a good example of it. The thing that you'll notice is that a lot of times they do have a border on them. The glass is held together by a lead cane, which is then soldered at the intersections. And in this case, we also have braces that keeps the windows from weaving one way or the other. The main thing I wanted to show you on these windows is the painting, because the painting is done entirely different than any way you would think painting would normally be done. First of all, the paint's made out of glass itself, powdered glass. It's usually mixed with water, and then it's painted on the whole piece. When that dries, they take off the paint they don't want, which is just the opposite of what you would normally see done with painted pieces. And you actually paint in two different types here. One is the outline that's done in black around some of the figures. For example, here's his hand. You can't cut glass into that particular shape around the fingers, so you simulate that by outlining it in black, and so it looks like a hand. So you can see the same pattern here and in here on the sheep. So that's the outlining part. The other part is the actual shading of the folds of the clothes. And that's the one where they actually brush it off, take off what they don't need. The really intriguing part is that this piece of glass is separate from this one and this one here. And when you're painting, you have to make sure that this line continues exactly onto the next piece. So the question is how do they do that? Because once the paint is on there, they actually fire it through a kiln, and that makes the paint, which is glass, really a part of the window and the glass. So it can't be washed off. But you can't do that. You can't actually fire it when the lead is in it, or the lead would melt. So you have to do all the pieces before you put them together. And like I said, they have to line up. The way the artist does that is he takes the individual pieces and he'll put them on the window, and he'll take wax and he'll wax the pieces on the position they should be in, and that's how he lines it up. Takes into consideration where the gaps for the lead would be. So that's basically how that's done with a conventional stained glass window. And this is, we talked before, this is a traditional, which is basically a realistic style, as opposed to a modern, which may or may not look like a figure. It could be anything, but I think the Holy Trinity windows are modern design, and they're done in faceted glass, and we'll take a look at that when we get in the studio. So this is the studio here. One of the things that I mentioned before, what you see here, for example, this is what's called a rubbing. If somebody had a stained glass window and they wanted to make a copy of it, or we need to replace some of the glass, we make a rubbing. We take this paper and put it over the stained glass, and wherever the lead lines are, we get them to come out. Now what do you think? You never guess what we used to put those lines on there with. We used to use a pencil, but then it smudged. The graphite would smudge all over. So we found out the thing that really worked the best was tar paper. So we put the paper on top of the stained glass window with the lead, and where the lead's sitting up, and we take the tar paper and run it over there, and that's how we get our outline. So it's just like when you're a kid with a nickel, and you take a pencil and you put it over the top of it. That's how it's done. So once we've got that, we have a pretty good idea of where the lines are, and we can actually, draw in then the dimensions that are needed to fit in the frame and whatever. And to give you an idea, when we do a window and put it into a frame, we only allow 1/8 of an inch tolerance on the whole window. So you got to be pretty accurate when you lay it out and when you cut it. This is Kay Tweedy. She's kind of the supervisor out here in the studio, and she does a lot of putting the windows together. Here is a piece of the chunk glass. It's about the size that they come in that we have. These are the way the windows are made at Holy Trinity.
We have a framework the size of the panel, because the epoxy is going to be poured into that framework, and that's what holds the glass together. And that's what you're looking at here. This is a finished panel. So you'll take your full-size sketch, let's pretend this is it, and take something like this, which is actually, a seamstress would use something like this for sewing. And you would just you punch along the lines of, so you have these little raised dots on the back side of the paper, and if you carefully put it down on a flat bed of sand, and then brush it with a brush, you should be able to transfer those little dots to the bed of sand so that you know where to put your cut pieces. And you can see a faint little. Typically, what you would do is you'd set them on there and punch them down just a little bit. As you can see, the back side, the smooth side is usually outside, and you usually view these things from the rough side on the inside of whatever structure they're set into. As far as faceting the glass, you kind of have to go at it from the side and chip it off like that, and you can go all the way around.
Here's some samples. Back in the old days, Bill Sr. used to take these and put them in the trunk of his car and go out and sell stained glass windows, and that's what those two panels are there. They show an example of a stained glass window and painting on it. You can see the borders are all painted where the grapes are and the leaves. And you can see the different painting. Now, that glass in there is called opalescent glass, and you'll see that a lot in the country churches around.
So the stained glass for me helped the sanctuary, I think, kind of come alive. It's pretty, I want to say bare, but you know, it's brick and wood, and that's pretty much it. They have a few banners, as you can see, but it's not much other than that. And so the stained glass really bring color to the sanctuary, which help a lot.
It's an interesting story, but you get to enjoy it as time goes along because there's always more in it, I think. There are times when we come back and we see things in it that we hadn't seen before.
And it really is a unique glass. I think, as we were talking, it's not your typical stained glass set in lead. They're chunks of glass, and if you look at them really up close, they're small pieces of glass that just explode in color.
You know, the stained glass windows, there's multiple colors that come through that stained glass windows. And I think here in our community, we have a lot of diversity in our congregation. And I think that's something to be celebrated in terms of people bring various skills to the table, and we're not all cut out of the same mold. And I think that shows in the stained glass windows, and it also shows here. And one of the things that we really strive to do here is communicate a message that all are welcome.